Have you ever wondered why some people seem to draw a line in the sand about certain behaviors, no matter who crosses it? What if I told you there's a personality type that's known for being genuinely caring and gentle, yet has some pretty firm non-negotiables when it comes to how they're treated? Welcome to the world of INFJs, the rarest personality type, making up only about 1 to 2% of the population. Today, we're diving deep into 10 things that INFJs absolutely refuse to tolerate from anyone, whether it's a best friend, a romantic partner, a family member, or even a boss. 1. Dishonesty and betrayal of trust. INFJs operate from a place of deep integrity. They live by their values, and they expect the same level of honesty from the people around them. When someone lies to an INFJ, it doesn't just hurt their feelings. It shatters something fundamental in the relationship. Here's the thing about INFJs. They're incredibly intuitive. They can often sense when someone's being dishonest, even if they can't quite put their finger on why. They notice the small inconsistencies, the way someone's eyes shift, the tone that doesn't quite match the words. When they catch you in a lie, it confirms their suspicions and makes them question everything else you've said. What makes this especially significant is that INFJs put enormous thought into their words before they speak. They're not careless with communication. They expect that same thoughtfulness from others. When someone lies to them, it feels like a personal rejection of who the INFJ is and what they stand for. They don't just move past it easily. Instead, they hold onto the memory of the betrayal as a marker that this person isn't as trustworthy as they once believed. The recovery from a breach of trust with an INFJ takes genuine time and consistent honesty. Half-truths don't cut it. Surface-level apologies won't work either. INFJs need to see real change, real accountability, and a genuine understanding of why their honesty matters so much. 2. Manipulation in games. INFJs see through manipulation pretty quickly. They're experts at reading people because they spend so much mental energy trying to understand human behavior. They notice when someone's trying to control a situation through guilt trips, playing the victim, or using emotional leverage to get their way. What frustrates INFJs most about manipulative behavior is that it treats them like they're not intelligent enough to see what's happening. Manipulation feels disrespectful to an INFJ because it suggests the other person doesn't believe they can communicate honestly and still get what they want. It's a form of dishonesty wrapped up in emotional tactics. INFJs also recognize when people are playing games, testing them to see how they'll react, using the silent treatment as punishment, or creating drama to get attention. These games feel exhausting and pointless to INFJs. They prefer direct conversation about problems. If you want something from an INFJ, or if there's an issue in the relationship, they want you to just say it. They'd rather have an uncomfortable conversation than deal with passive-aggressive behavior or emotional manipulation. The reason INFJs refuse to tolerate this is because they genuinely try to be straightforward themselves. They expect that same energy from others. When someone manipulates an INFJ, it feels like a fundamental violation of the respect and honesty that should exist between people who care about each other. 3. Being taken for granted. INFJs are givers. They often go out of their way to help people, listen to their problems, offer advice, and show up when they're needed. But here's what happens. People sometimes forget to appreciate what INFJs do. They start expecting the help, the listening, and the support as though it's owed to them. This is one of the quickest ways to push an INFJ away. They don't help people because they expect something in return, but they do need to know that what they're doing matters and that it's recognized. When someone takes an INFJ's efforts for granted, it sends a message that the INFJ's time and energy aren't valuable. What's particularly painful for INFJs is when they've been deeply generous with someone, and that person shows no gratitude or appreciation. Over time, this makes INFJs start to question whether they should keep giving so much. They might pull back, stop reaching out, or create distance in the relationship. They don't do this out of spite. They do it out of self-protection. INFJs also notice when people only reach out when they need something. If a friend or family member only calls when they want advice or help, but never just to check in or see how the INFJ is doing, that imbalance becomes really obvious. INFJs crave reciprocal relationships where both people are investing in each other's well-being. 4. Lack of authenticity and real connection. INFJs crave genuine human connection. They want to know the real person behind a mask, not just the version someone shows to the world. Superficial conversations and surface-level friendships leave INFJs feeling empty and unfulfilled. When someone refuses to be authentic or vulnerable with an INFJ, it creates a barrier that INFJs find almost impossible to tolerate. They're offering their genuine self, their real thoughts and feelings, and they expect the same in return. If someone keeps their walls up, constantly performs a version of themselves, or refuses to share anything meaningful, the INFJ will eventually decide that the friendship or relationship isn't worth their emotional investment. This is particularly true in romantic relationships. INFJs need a partner who's willing to be emotionally available and genuine. They want to know their partner's real hopes, fears, dreams, and insecurities. A partner who keeps everything surface level or who shuts down emotional conversations will face an INFJ who becomes increasingly distant and withdrawn. INFJs also refuse to tolerate fakeness just to go along with social norms. They see through people who say what they think others want to hear instead of what they actually believe. This kind of inauthenticity feels exhausting to INFJs because it requires them to work harder to figure out what's actually true beneath the performance. 5. Disrespect for their values and beliefs. INFJs are guided by their core values. These aren't casual preferences. They're fundamental to who the INFJ is. When someone disrespects an INFJ's values or tries to convince them to compromise on what they believe in, they're essentially asking the INFJ to become someone different. This is a hard boundary for INFJs. They won't tolerate people who mock their beliefs, pressure them to act against their values, or try to convince them that their principles don't matter. If an INFJ believes something is wrong, they won't do it, no matter how much pressure someone applies. What makes this even more serious is when someone tries to get an INFJ to compromise their values for the sake of the relationship or friendship. An INFJ might end a long-term relationship if their partner keeps asking them to go against their principles. They'd rather be alone than live inauthentically. This applies to politics, religion, morality, and how people should be treated. If you're disrespecting things that matter deeply to an INFJ, they're going to push back hard. They might try to have conversations about it, hoping you'll understand where they're coming from, but ultimately, they won't stick around if you continue to mock or dismiss what they stand for. 6. Emotional coldness and withdrawal. INFJs are deeply emotional people, even if they don't always show it openly. They need emotional responsiveness from their relationships. When someone is emotionally cold, avoidant, or withdrawn, INFJs struggle to feel connected to them. If an INFJ opens up emotionally and their partner or friend respond with indifference, it's devastating. They've taken a risk by being vulnerable, and that coldness feels like a rejection. Over time, an INFJ will stop trying to connect emotionally with someone who consistently shuts them down or refuses to engage at that level. This also applies to physical affection. While not all INFJs are the same, many of them value touch and affection as a way of feeling loved and connected. If a romantic partner is consistently distant or cold in that way, the INFJ will feel neglected and may start to question whether the relationship is meeting their needs. What's important to understand is that INFJs don't need constant emotional expression. They're comfortable with quiet moments and thoughtful silence. But they do need to know that the people they care about can meet them emotionally sometimes. Complete emotional unavailability is something they absolutely refuse to accept as normal in a close relationship. 7. Selfishness and lack of consideration. INFJs are naturally considerate. They think about how their actions affect other people. They consider other people's feelings and perspectives before they act. When someone is consistently selfish or doesn't seem to care how their behavior impacts the people around them, INFJs find it really hard to respect that person. This goes beyond just occasional thoughtlessness. Everyone has moments where they're self-centered or forget to think about others' needs. But when someone is chronically selfish, when they constantly make decisions that benefit themselves without considering how it affects the people who care about them, an INFJ will eventually pull away. INFJs also notice when people are only interested in their own problems and experiences. If someone only talks about themselves, only wants to discuss their achievements or their struggles, and never asks about the INFJ's life or shows genuine interest in their experiences, that one-sided dynamic becomes exhausting. INFJs value reciprocal relationships, where both people are invested in each other. What's particularly frustrating for INFJs is when someone they've been generous with turns out to be selfish. An INFJ might have bent over backward to help someone, and then discover that person would never do the same for them. That revelation changes how the INFJ sees that person, and it often marks the beginning of the end for the relationship. 8. Criticism without compassion. INFJs are often their own harshest critics. They hold themselves to incredibly high standards and spend a lot of time thinking about how they could have done better or been better. So when someone else criticizes them, it can hit really hard, especially if the criticism comes across as harsh or without any compassion. This doesn't mean INFJs can't handle criticism. They can, and they often appreciate honest feedback because they're always trying to improve. But they need the criticism to come from a place of care, not judgment. They need to sense that the person offering the criticism actually likes them and wants to help them grow, rather than just pointing out their flaws to make themselves feel superior. When someone criticizes an INFJ in a way that feels cold, mocking, or designed to hurt, the INFJ will remember it for a long time. They might internalize it, yes, but they'll also start to resent the person who said it. If someone consistently criticizes the INFJ without ever offering any kindness or appreciation, the INFJ will eventually decide that this person doesn't deserve access to their inner world. INFJs also refuse to tolerate public criticism or humiliation. If someone embarrasses them in front of others or criticizes them in a public setting, that's a serious breach in an INFJ's eyes. They believe that real issues should be discussed privately, with compassion, and with the goal of understanding and growth. 9. Broken promises and unreliability. When an INFJ makes a promise, they mean it. They'll move mountains to follow through on what they've committed to. They expect the same level of dedication and reliability from the people they care about. When someone repeatedly breaks promises or isn't reliable, INFJs become deeply disappointed and lose respect for that person. This is about more than just minor inconveniences. This is about someone who says they're going to be there and then isn't. Someone who makes plans and cancels them repeatedly. Someone who promises to change and never does. Someone who commits to something and then abandons it when it gets hard. What makes this particularly painful for INFJs is that they often depend on people's promises because they believe what people say. They don't play games with their words, so they assume others don't either. When someone breaks a promise to an INFJ, it feels like a personal betrayal because the INFJ was counting on that person to be as good as their word. INFJs also notice patterns. If someone breaks a promise once, the INFJ might forgive it. But if it happens repeatedly, the INFJ will start to see that person as unreliable. They'll stop counting on that person. They'll stop making plans with them. Essentially, the INFJ will downgrade that relationship to something much less significant in their life. 10. Lack of growth and accountability. INFJs are always working on themselves. They're constantly thinking about how they can be better people, how they can understand themselves and others more deeply, and how they can grow as human beings. Because of this, they have very little tolerance for people who refuse to acknowledge their mistakes or work on improving themselves. When someone hurts an INFJ and then refuses to take responsibility for their actions, the INFJ finds it almost impossible to move past it. An INFJ needs to see genuine accountability. They need the person to understand why what they did was wrong, to show remorse, and to commit to doing better. What's especially frustrating for INFJs is when someone makes the same mistake repeatedly and acts like the INFJ is being unreasonable for bringing it up again. If someone keeps hurting the INFJ in the same way and never seems to learn from it, the INFJ will eventually conclude that this person isn't capable of the kind of relationship the INFJ needs. INFJs also refuse to tolerate people who are stuck in their ways and resistant to any kind of personal growth. If someone refuses to question their beliefs, refuses to see other perspectives, and refuses to acknowledge that they might be wrong about something, an INFJ will lose respect for them. The INFJ will see this person as someone who isn't interested in real connection or understanding. Bringing it all together, why these boundaries matter. Understanding these 10 things that INFJs refuse to tolerate isn't just about knowing what to avoid. It's about recognizing that INFJs have boundaries because they value genuine human connection and personal integrity. These boundaries aren't personal attacks on anyone. They're evidence that INFJs take relationships seriously and believe they deserve to be treated with honesty, respect, and care. The truth is, INFJs often appear to be very flexible and accommodating. They're people pleasers who hate confrontation and often sacrifice their own needs for others. But underneath all that accommodation is a solid core of values and boundaries that don't budge. When someone crosses these lines repeatedly, an INFJ might seem to suddenly cut them off, but really, that INFJ has been giving warning signs for a long time. If you're an INFJ reading this, it might help to know that your boundaries aren't mean or unreasonable. You're asking for basic things: honesty, authenticity, respect, and care. You're not asking for the impossible. If people in your life can't meet you on these points, that says something about them, not about you. If you're someone who cares about an INFJ, understanding these boundaries is essential. INFJs make some of the most loyal, supportive, and caring friends and partners you could ask for. But that comes with the understanding that you're going to give them the same level of honesty, respect, and authenticity they're giving you. It's a fair exchange. Conclusion. The INFJ personality type is complex and sometimes misunderstood. People often see their gentleness and assume they can walk over them. But that's a mistake. INFJs have a strong sense of right and wrong, and they're willing to protect their peace and their integrity by setting firm boundaries. These 10 things that INFJs refuse to tolerate aren't about being difficult or hard to please. They're about maintaining relationships that are authentic, respectful, and mutually caring. They're about protecting themselves from people who don't value them or who consistently act in ways that violate their core principles. If you have an INFJ in your life, respect these boundaries. Be honest, be real, be consistent. Show up for them the way they show up for you. And if you're an INFJ, remember that having boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. You deserve relationships built on trust, authenticity, and genuine care. Don't settle for anything less.